Hey, after a little bit of a break in the sense that I did a couple old SPI, well, a couple old S&T games, one's a TSR era, the other one almost, we're going to try something that'll tax me a little more again. This is a new game to me, Double Star. Not obviously a very new game since it's a Mark Miller GW design, but yeah. So this one looked interesting. Someone whose views I respect recommended it, and I don't always agree with him, but we'll see. I have a certain taste for space games, and this one looks like a somewhat maybe less detailed and less fiddly, but captures some of the elements that I like out of Battlefleet Mars, which is notably that it has the planets moving around in orbits. And you're, unlike in High Frontier, you're actually going to have to deal with those planets and how they shift position through the course of the game. It also has an interesting kind of almost a ground situation to it, where the planets are divided up into little hexes of their own, except for these tiny planets, and the moons. The moons aren't actually represented on the board unless you rip them from the gravity of their planet and haul them around. The premise behind this is that this is a binary system, and I believe this star is circling this one, but in such a way that it's not going to affect, we don't have to actually move the entire star system, right? And if you think about it, that kind of can make sense, because if it continues to face in the same way in terms of its orbits, at least over the course of the time in a game, it doesn't really make too much difference, and it can kind of be estimated within the orbits that you see. So the board's going to have these orbital paths. It has the stars, and it has these tracks for the planets. Then it also has little, I guess, fleet markers. I don't remember how you represent them, because there really aren't. I'll think about this. There really aren't fleet markers in the game, but that I remember. But I've never played it before, so you have. I haven't gone into the entire description. So the two cultures that are at war here are both Earth stock. One is Chinese heritage, and the other is an Islamic group, and I got them the wrong way. The Islamicists came here first, and the Chinese kind of come in by accident, and the already existing colony shuns them and does not allow them to land, puts up defenses, etc. But they are able to find a place to live over here. And we've got the names of the things based on that. You've got, I don't know the whether those are accurate or not. The Chinese ones, well, we've got I Chin and a number of others that are apparently whoever designed this seems to have some at least cursory understanding of the Chinese. I assume they probably did something similar with the Islamic factions names, but they're not familiar. There seems to be more link with those. You also have bunches and bunches of spaceships, and they have values on them, which I think are attack, defense, and movement, but we'll see. Yeah, that's what they are. You have a number of other things. These are population markers. Hey, is this like Nucor? Not exactly. I don't remember what these cranes are. I think those are defense systems, and these are power plants, but yeah, those are power plants. These are planetary defenses. These little things here are industrial sites, which is where you can build more crap. But production is not a major part in this game. In fact, the scenarios are considered basically your main production's already done, and you're only allowed to build some replacement stuff, you're not allowed to lay down more ships. But you have a lot of countermix in order to configure your fleet in different fashions. Let's see. All right. Let's start with the rules, I guess. So it's going to be a kind of an I go, you go. One player is the phasing player at any given time, and the other player is phasing. And let's see whether we have a turn sequence here. Yeah. So first there's movement, then there's combat. Real simple. In the movement phase, you're going to largely be moving your ships out in space. And it's not exactly vector, but it has facing at least. And then during the combat, you attack things in your same hex. And the combat goes multiple rounds until you destroy stuff. And then after each player has a turn, then there's an interphase in which the planets, every other interphase, yeah, we're going to try to remember that. The thingy is shaded. This is the turn record track, so turn 1 would be no movement. Turn 2, all the planets would move. Let's see. Doesn't say which way we move them yet. Okay. Inside each planetary hex, you have a stacking. No more than 3 planetary defense, no more than 3 industry in a space, no more than 1 base in a space, that's these things. No more than 10 power plants in a space. As much population with one limitation. If you're on a planetoid, it has to have a base to have it. I don't think this counts as a planetoid. If you're on a planetoid, I think this is an actual little planet. What does planetoid mean? Yeah, I know. If you're on a planetoid, you must have a base to have a population there because it doesn't have an atmosphere, and you're only allowed 5 population maximum. And then ships, they say any, but that's only, you can only have them at a base. If you newly produce things, which are not going to be full ships, they're put in an industry and then get to move to the base. And the things that are built, I know power plants can be built. I don't know what else can be built. Power plants and fighters are the 2 things I can think of, and fighters are, very small craft. Okay, both sides cannot be in a surface hex at the same time. The moons are tied to their planets, and like I said, they'll normally be attached to the planet, but it is possible to attach a power plant to it, burn that power plant out, and set the moon adrift. Okay, so ships and planetoids that are being moved have facing, and they must face towards a specific hex side. They're allowed to group in task forces. We don't know how task forces are marked. I do not see any. Oh, there's these TF markers. I bet you those are the task forces. Let's see where they are. They don't look. No, that's transport. Formation marker. No, that's not it. FT is fighting transport, not fighters. Here are the fighters. Robot fighters and orbital fighters. No, I do not see any task force markers. And these, which I have not sorted out, are all the ship formations. When ships fight, they'll be in formation. We'll talk about that in a bit. So yeah, I don't know. Missing something, or more likely they just aren't provided and you're supposed to use a little piece of paper or something, if you so desire. Aha! Okay, so I guess both of the star systems have a counterclockwise orbit. One hex is 75 million kilometers, or a half AU. Turns around 2 weeks. Okay, let's see what we have here. So when you move, you're going to have to move forward for each movement point that you spend, either directly forward or into an adjacent hex. If you move into a right or left adjacent hex, your facing shifts at that moment. So if I'm facing like this and I want to move here, I'm like that. And that's one movement point. There's a second movement point. So you can see the turning is almost like aircraft turning or something, which seems kind of weird. But and again, you don't have any velocity or anything. There's no vectors involved in this, which is a little disappointing. Planets, hey, gravity fields, all that kind of stuff, huh? That would be really awesome, but really, really hard to cope with, I think. Try to play Triplanetary on a moving map, which is one of the things Triplanetary is missing, of course. Okay. If you don't move at all, you can completely pivot your ship around 360 degrees or less. If you're in space and you enter a hex with a world or planetoid, you can land on that body by spending a movement point. If you have more than one option, you select which one, but no matter what, there has to be a base present in order to land, and you can't land at an enemy base. Huh? How do you land? How do you take things over? Yeah, we'll talk about that when we figure it out. I have read these rules, but they haven't stuck very well. You can spend a movement point in order to take off into space and assume any facing, and then you can continue to spend movement points. Ships that are in a world or planetoid orbit of that body, ship counters in a space hex with a world or planetoid orbit, move with the planet without spending any movement points. This is mandatory with the ships. So orbital fighters, which have no movement points, will always stick with, there they are. Always, what are the RFs again? Robot fighters, okay. They'll always stick with the planet that they're associated with once they're in space. Worlds are going to move in the orbital paths, like I said, every other interim phase. Moons are just going to be represented on here unless they break out. Free planetoids. Once you get a small disk world, I'm not sure what this counts as. I think it's small enough, but I'm not positive. So you see this? This takes up. Yeah, it looks like they're about the same size. So all these kind of one space worlds, I guess, they can be grabbed and moved. In order to break orbit, whatever their orbit is, you have to have a power plant on the planetoid and burn it. It's removed from the game or from the map. And then the orbit is broken, and the planetoid will be put on the map, assuming any facing. And from then on, it'll be moving one hex in the direction it's facing for the rest of the game until somebody burns another power plant. It moves in the interim phases in the direction it's facing at its recorded speed. You can expend a power plant in order to accelerate or decelerate or alter its direction. This has to be noted on paper if they have speed. They happen before the planetoid moves normally. Expending a power plant, you can increase its speed by 1, you can decrease its speed by 1, or you can alter its facing by 1 hex side, but keeping the speed the same. If you're at speed 0 and you blow one of these, I don't know. If you're at speed 0, I think you can assume any facing with the damn thing, but it doesn't really make much difference. Okay. A free planetoid with a speed of 1 and a facing along a printed orbital path may assume that orbit by spending another power point, and then it'll join the orbit and start spinning around on that at normal orbiting velocity, which is every other interim turn. every other turn. Interim phase. You can put one around orbit of a world and assume a printed orbit in the same hex as a body already present. Whatever. If you wish, you can also burn a power plant in the same hex as a world or moon and not land it on the planet, and instead, or not have it orbit the planet, but instead have it land on the planet. Now, as you can imagine, this is probably not very pleasant for anybody involved in it. And there's going to be effects to that. Okay, when you're in the same hex for combat, you're allowed to do space combat and planetary bombardment and planetary defense, planetary impact. Okay, the first thing that happens if there's a combat going on is that the ships choose a formation that they know. And we'll get to that. Ow, damn it. They may also designate backup formations from formations they know. Then each ship or task force formation, whatever, is allowed to fire at a specific target. And this is going to generally be simultaneous, but there are some exceptions based on formation. The formation rules to this are really, really cool. They're probably the neatest thing to it. I'm thinking about trying to import something like them into High Guard, if you're familiar with that. It's Traveler's very, very abstract combat system for fleet battles. Okay, and if neither side breaks off, then you just keep shooting at each other until somebody cannot make effective attacks or one side's left. I don't know quite what happens. It's not explained in the rules. If neither side can attack each other, I think the combat just ends and they stay in the hex, but I'm not sure. At that point, planetary defense units are allowed to fire twice, picking targets and doing attacks. And then any ships that have survived and haven't broken off, which could mean the ships can't affect each other anymore, are allowed to do bombardment onto the surface. Robotic ships will self-destruct when they do so. Other ships fire on space, and you can also launch a planetoid and smash it into some other celestial body. Which is another cool rule. Okay. Ships from task forces can take formations in the combat phase. There's going to be 5 types of formation in the game, and they're represented in this by these things. Let's talk about them. There's cone, wedge, cylinder, globe, and scattered. The default is scattered. That's every ship for itself. In a cone, the ships that are in the cone formation, and that may be a subset of the entire fleet, attack using the sum of all their attack factors present. Each ship defends with its full defense factor. They don't help each other much there, plus 1 point for each additional ship in the formation. So the cone has a little bit of defensive factor, but mainly it concentrates the attack fire all at once. That's kind of neat. A wedge, the ships attack using the factor of the best ship present, plus 1 point for each additional unscreened ship present. Talk about screening later. Screen ships are going to be in the center of the wedge, and they're not going to be able to fire or be fired at. Each ship defends with its defense factor, plus 1 point for each additional unscreened ship present. So this is a weaker tactic on offense and about equal on defense, with the one exception that it can screen ships. The ships that are screened, like I said, won't be able to add their fire combat, and they won't be able to be picked off and fired at. A wedge formation has to have... Oh, I didn't explain this. Did I? A cone has to have at least 4 ships, or else it stops being a cone and you actually lose that formation for that fleet. A wedge has to contain at least 4 unscreened ships, or it becomes scattered. The next one's cylinder. Ships attack with the sum of all unscreened attack factors. That's pretty potent. And each ship defends with its defense factor, plus 1 point for each additional unscreened ship present. This sounds like the cone, doesn't it? Except as with the wedge, it can screen ships. A cylinder, though, because it's it's basically the advantages of a cone and of a wedge. It's going to require 6 unscreened ships, or else it becomes scattered. So it's a harder formation to maintain. A globe, this is sort of the ultimate formation. This is strange, but ships attack using a factor equal to all attack factors present. Okay, the globe is actually surrounding the enemies. In addition, the globe is allowed a first fire against its target in each combat round. Each ship defends with its defense factor, plus 1 point for each additional ship in the formation. When the globe is assumed, the ships must first maneuver into position. For the first combat round of the globe, all ships are treated as if they're scattered. But on the second and subsequent, now they've got the globe around the enemy. They've got them surrounded. This must contain at least 8 ships and at least 3 more than its target formation, or else it becomes scattered. So this is important. This only works if you outnumber somebody. It's a tricky formation to pull off. Scattered, like I said, the ships just operate as they are with their values. Your ships in a task force are allowed to be in 1 or more formations, dividing the ships into groups and placing formation counters on the groups. Any extra formation counters can be used for backup formations in the event the formation is broken. The top counter indicates, okay. When a combat result of formation broken occurs, the formation counter is removed. If there's a backup formation counter present beneath it, you drop into the new formation, which may be the same one as you just had. After formations have been declared, the attention of the player shifts to combat itself. Okay, there's 2 sides to combat: attacker and defender fire. The attacker selects a target for each of his formations and scattered single ships, and rolls an attack as a unit, and may only fire once. Targets are individual enemy ships, whether they're in a formation or not. The attacks are resolved using a ship-to-ship combat results table. Actually, over here, you're going to be looking at a differential, and you can see the differentials, interestingly enough, it's not like +1, +2, +3, +4. It starts going geometric. So you have to give very large advances to get on the best tables, which is kind of nifty. Okay. Hey, there's some really neat design ideas in this one. All right, where are we? But before, okay, and both sides get to fire before any results are taken. Now, there's one exception to that, which is the globe. If you're a defender against a globe formation that's been formed, you cannot shoot outside of that globe. And also, of course, the globe gets first fire on a target ship. After attacks and counterattacks are resolved, losses are implemented, disrupted ships are inverted to show that status and are removed from the formation, eliminated ships are removed from play, and broken formations can be scattered or reformed. So we've got different values here. Target disrupted, it's inverted and remains so until the end of the current player turn. So it's out of the combat for the rest of the... Well, it's not allowed to attack for the rest of the combat, and it can flee. Target eliminated, boom, it's gone. Formation broken, B, the target's eliminated and the formation is automatically broken. You lose the formation counter. That's the most potent thing you can do by shooting at a ship. Like I said, globes get to fire first, but only if it's the attacker. I guess the phasing player? I don't know. That doesn't quite make sense to me. Like, I don't know why the defender wouldn't be able to form globes. So I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to pay attention to that particular caveat. We'll see. When ship-to-ship combat occurs, the firing ship determines the attack factor, blah, 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 all pretty easy. Firing continues until one side breaks off or is completely destroyed, or until neither side can make an effective attack. If you can't do better than a no effect on the best possible die roll, you can no longer make effective attacks. You may elect to break off combat by so stating. The opposing forces get 1 round of attacks without the withdrawing player getting counterattacks. Ships which survive at the end of this procedure move to an adjacent hex, which may not be a planet or planetoid. There doesn't seem to be any restriction against fleeing from inside a globe that's been formed around you. Planetary defense fire. If you're in the same hex as a world or planetoid, you indicate the specific world or planetoid hex which you intend to attack. If there's no intention to attack, you do not approach close enough to be in range of the defense fires, and you will not get shot by them. If you're attacking a world surface hex that contains or is adjacent to, because remember we got a planetary defense hex, then that unit is within range and you can be targeted. They each are allowed to fire twice at the ships. That can be 2 shots at one target or 1 shot at 2 different targets or whatever. And you compare the type of ship to a die roll, and that's it. You make a roll. Okay. Surface strikes, ships and free planetoids which survive planetary defense. How does a planetoid not? You can destroy a planetoid. Excellent. These are some potent weapons here. And everybody on it. Whatever. Proceed to attack world or planetary surfaces. Each ship attacks independently, consulting the surface strike table. 1 die is rolled, and the result is applied to the table, cross-indexing the result with the ship's attack factor. So you look at the ship's printed attack factor, and you might get deaths, which loses what? A planetary defense, power plant, ship, or base chosen by the attacker. Or industry, the surface hex loses an industry marker. There's only 3 industry markers in the game for each side, and if you take them all out, they're not building any more replacements. So you can see, though, when we get to the scenarios, that's not that big a deal. Maybe. I don't know. Okay. Free planetoids attack in a special manner. Their impact is devastating. First, you use a scatter diagram to see where you land. And let me see how this is worded. If it hits where targeted, or if it hits an adjacent hex. This explains it. You designate which hit you're going to roll. If the result is greater than 4, the planetoid will not hit the target hex. If the target body is a small disk, then the planetoid just missed entirely. Scratch. If the target's a large disk, it'll hit an adjacent hex, and you take the aimed hex and look at the 3 adjacent hexes. And I think everything's got 3 except this, which I don't know what happens if you aim for the center. It spins all the way around if it's on a center hex. Gotcha. Because that's both the poles at once or something like that. Don't ask me. Okay. And that'll completely destroy that hex, and it'll damage other hexes. No, half the polar units. The polar hexes face up is on top of the polar, face down is on the other side of the planet. That's your way of noting that. I didn't realize that. But everything in the impacted hex is destroyed. Items in adjacent hexes have to roll on a 3 or better. They survive, otherwise they're destroyed. Okay. Training. Each month, i.e. each blue thing that you spend in space with a task force, you have succeeded in training. Well, you have a chance to succeed. You roll a die on a 3 or better. If you're within the outermost orbit of your home system, you gain one of these tokens for your fleet. And it's only on a 5 or 6 if you're outside of your home system, outermost orbit, space. So there's a reason and an advantage to the defend. It's here. Now, no matter what, training Uh-oh. On a 6, you lose a token. Each month, there's a chance task force such occurs. I think you're basically going to be rolling 2 dice there. One to see if it increases, one to see if it decreases. It could do both. If you're on a base, you do not roll to determine if you lose formation, but I think you also don't roll for increases because you're also not in space if you're on a base. Okay? You can have no formation counters or up to 6 at any one time for any task force. If you roll for the loss and gain in each, you roll for both. If a formation is received, it's drawn randomly. If it's lost, you select which one you want to get rid of. Whenever you take a formation broken, you lose the formation counter. Or if you're broken automatically by the number of ships going down, that formation counter is lost as well. And these are going to all go in a cup, so we can draw them randomly. Okay, production. The biggie here is at the beginning of the game, you're going to have a certain budget, and you can buy ships, and their costs are unfortunately laid out here. So, like, it's kind of hard to read. Command ship costs 8, orbital fighters 2 each. It would be useful if there was a chart that gave all the costs of different things, but there is not. And at the beginning of the scenario, you're going to buy your force based on that. This is what's kind of tricky. I started setting it up and said, I'm not comfortable enough with the rolls to know what kind of force I want, even though I know the scenario. In addition, any excess budget can be used. Well, you have subsequent production, which you can use to buy things during the scenario. And the only things you're allowed to buy there are fighters, the 2 types, and power plants. And they take 6 turns to build. Excess budget can also be used for conversion of cruisers to replace destroyed command ships, or for emergency production of fighters or power plants. Emergency production allows you to manufacture power plants or robot or orbital fighters in only 4 turns, but it costs you twice as much to do. The cruisers require you to have, the command cruisers, battle cruisers or command cruisers. You have to spend 4 points to upgrade. Now, command ship is there. Battle cruiser, battle cruiser I bet goes up to a battleship if you upgrade it. And heavy cruiser, I'm trying to find it. No, I bet it doesn't. I don't know. Battle cruiser may be a command ship. What did we have about command ships? You need command ships for something. Command ships. These are your flagships. So only cruisers can command a fleet task force. And I don't know if they have any other value. I will come back to that after I'm done with the rest of the rolls when I start playing, because I don't want to be paging through the rules anymore. My battery's almost dead. Okay. Some other costs are listed here. Okay. Now, for each scenario is set up largely in the same way, but the amount of troops and points and how long the scenario lasts are a little different. So basically, the opposing player sets up all your planets in the proper orbits. This allows him to kind of set you up so you're not on the best possible or worst possible footing. Well, on the worst possible footing he can manage, but it's hard to tell what that means. Then you must put your population. Now, the Islamists have 1445, The Chinese have 1262, and those are represented with these. And those have to be placed on specific hexes here, and they can also be placed on planetoids and such not. I don't know if that's a planetoid or a planet. Again, something I'll look up and try to figure out a little bit more to make sure. You're allowed 5 population per base, up to 2 bases on one of these. One can be inverted because this is like a pole, it has 2 sides, I guess. I didn't see that explained before, but I see hints to it. You have 3 industry counters. You must place these on a world large disk surface that has at least 10 points of population. All 3 can be placed in the same world surface hex, or they can be distributed to several hexes. Probably dangerous to put them all in one because that's real planetoid bait. The remaining items are purchased as the scenario begins, and I assume they start in bases. Okay, so the scenarios, I'm going to be doing the sneak attack first. That's the smallest of them. The Islamic have 180 points with 40 extra points to spend during the course of the scenario, whereas the Chinese have 200 points, but only 10 to spend for the rest of the scenario. They really have to have their attack planned out and everything. And it's one of the problems is I think we're going to have real trouble catching this. The other scenarios are a little, the next one's Armageddon, which is just wiping the players out. And then the final one is a raid where both players are launching fleets at each other. I'll send this up now because my battery's almost dead.